You're watching the Everything Network. Born and raised in Brooklyn, New York City in 1960, George Zappola joined the Lucchese crime family, working for the Brooklyn faction in the mid-80s. He became one of Anthony Casso's closest allies, and in 1990 he was promoted to captain. Both his father and uncle were small-time associates of the mob and were murdered by unknown gunmen in homicides that were never solved. Despite this, George still wanted to become a made man in the mafia. A Brooklyn faction leader, Zappola joined the labor and construction racketeering operation that earned the most money for the family. This operation was run by Stephen Crea of the Bronx faction. He helped Anthony oversee his various business enterprises. A bagel factory that supplied local McDonald's restaurants. He also worked the numbers rackets and slot machines. He enjoyed watching Major League Baseball games and fights in bars around Brooklyn. He was a regular patron of Bruno's hair salon in Bensonhurst, where he would get a massage and pedicure from time to time. He was fastidious about his appearance and obsessed about his weight, walking 6 miles every day to stay trim. He wore a gold watch that was a gift from Casso, inscribed, "A true friend," from Anthony. George was careless about police surveillance and electronic counter-surveillance, and carried a cell phone to which only Casso had the number. He was Casso's most trusted killer. In 1987, George Zappola participated in the ambush murder of Lucchese captain Michael Papadio. Michael was a rich captain of the Lucchese family, earning an estimated $1 million a year from his garment racketeering business. He owed a large house in Queens worth $2 million, an apartment at 35 Park Avenue in Manhattan, a condo in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, a house in the Hamptons, and drove a Mercedes S-Class. Michael had been a made man in the Lucchese crime family for many years, getting his stripes sometime between 1974 and 1977. He was a member of the Harlem Bronx faction, based in the northern areas of New York City. He was promoted to captain after the murder of his older brother Andimo, who was murdered outside his home in Lido Beach, Long Island, on September 25, 1976. Michael had been in place for many years, taking over the position on the death of his brother, and as such, was one of the most powerful crime figures in the area. Not only was he a huge earner, but he also operated a very lucrative loan sharking business in the streets, one that grossed millions of dollars each year. He was allegedly hiding the money gained from over 50 businesses away from the family for his own benefit. He had earned $15 million that boss was unaware of. He was called to a meeting with bosses Vittorio Amuso and Anthony Casso in Manhattan to explain his side of the story. In a violent and heated confrontation, Amuso demoted Michael from his job in the garment industry, demanding he hand it over all record books he was maintaining that involved details on the companies and unions that the family controlled. The meeting ended with Michael refusing to hand over his business. He told Amuso and Casso that they have brought nothing but destruction and division amongst the family for being too greedy, then walked out of the meeting, vowing to stay on the job, ignoring Amuso's demands. The boss warned him that if he persisted, he would issue instructions to have him killed. But like a man with a death wish, Michael Papadio kept walking out and continued to involve himself in the day-to-day running of the family's garment district affairs. In the months after the meeting, Captain Alphonse Diaco met with Michael Papadio several times to try and convince him to hand over his businesses, saying that Amuso would spare his life if he obeyed the orders. But Mikey was too stubborn to give up his businesses. He constantly asked what for, and he wanted proof that he was stealing money. On the day of his murder, Papadio and his wife Frances left their home in Queens at 8:30 in the morning. They stopped at the diner where he told her he was going for a coffee, before heading next door to pick up some fruit and vegetables. They agreed to meet in an hour. She drove off to do her own shopping. She returned about 10 a.m., but Michael was not waiting for her. He had met up with Captain Salvador Avellino and his son Carmine at the diner, and they both went to a bakery in Queens, owned by Avellino. When Michael and the Avellinos arrived at the bakery, they went inside. Alphonse Diarco and George Zappola waited to carry out the killing. Diarco was carrying a copper wire cable wrapped in blue insulation tape. Zappola was holding a .22 revolver. As Carmine Avellino led Michael through the bakery towards the rear office area, Diarco sprang out from behind a pillar and started bashing Michael around the head with a makeshift weapon. To everyone's surprise, the man remained standing, blood streaming from his face. He screamed out, "Why are you hitting me?" Zappola stepped up, produced a revolver, and shot Michael. The bullet actually ricocheted off his head, striking a door frame, and amazingly Michael remained standing, holding his face between his hands. Zappola then pulled out a snub-nosed .38 caliber revolver and shot Michael again in the head. Unbelievably, he still remained on his feet, his legs now spread wide to support his dying body. Salvador Avellino, Alphonse Diarco, and George Zappola stood around attacking him until he fell to his knees and collapsed onto the floor, dead. In February 1990, Zappola traveled to Los Angeles, California, to supervise a hit on fellow Lucchese soldier Anthony Dallapie, which was carried out by Alphonse Diarco's son, Little Joe Diarco. On the night in question, Diarco and Zappola were dressed in hooded sweatshirts. Little Joe had a .380 Beretta and a .357 Magnum. Zappola remained hidden, supervising Little Joe and ensuring that Dallapie was actually murdered. Dallapie walked into a parking garage carrying a garment bag. Little Joe stepped out of the shadows and shot him. Diarco walked over to Dallapie and delivered a shot directly into his head. In May 1990, Zappola and George Conte shot James D. Bishop, a Democratic district leader and former head of the Painters Union in Whitestone, Queens, as he was parking his car. The Lucchese family had controlled and looted the District Council 9 of the International Brotherhood of Painters and Allied Trades for years. The mobsters would receive kickbacks from contractors in exchange for bid rigging and allowing the use of cheaper non-union workers. When it appeared that Bishop might cooperate with prosecutors in a state investigation of the District Council, the Lucchese family ordered Zappola and Conte to murder him. The early 1990s turned into a disaster for the Lucchese family. In 1991, Vittorio Musso was convicted on murder charges and sentenced to life in prison. With Musso in prison, Casso assumed the family leadership and became the new boss. However, Casso was soon indicted himself on murder and racketeering charges and fled the state. During this period, Cree was elevated to underboss, acting on direct orders from the absent Musso and Casso. In 1993, Casso was finally captured in New Jersey. George Zappola and Captains Frank Papagni and Frank Gioia Jr. saw an opportunity to wrest power away from underboss Cree. With his ascension to power, Cree had shifted the family's base of power away from Brooklyn. The power bases for Zappola, Papagni, and Gioia were in Manhattan and the Bronx, the historic power base of the Lucchese family. Zappola, Papagni, Gioia, and consigliere Frank Lastarino started planning to murder Stephen Crea. The disaffected mobsters also conspired with Anthony Casso to kill then-acting boss of the Gambino crime family, John Jr. Gotti, in retaliation for the killing of Patrick Testa. Allegedly, Zappola and his fellow conspirators also wanted to kill Gotti's rival, Nicholas Corazzo, in an attempt to split up the Gambino family by causing an internal civil war. Unfortunately for Zappola and the other mobsters, legal problems thwarted all of their plotting. Mathematically, after his 1993 capture, Anthony Casso decided to avoid prison by becoming a government witness. Towards 1994, Zappola was indicted on racketeering and murder charges. As it turned, Casso was dropped from the witness protection program and sent to prison for life. Although Casso never testified, the threat of his testimony convinced Gioia to cooperate with the government for protection. Gioia's testimony would lead to massive indictments of racketeering, extortion, loan sharking, illegal gambling, bribery, money laundering, fraud, conspiracy, and murder charges. As winter of 1993 through 1994 set in, and Casso's March trial date neared, he had grown more desperate. After 2 previously failed breakout attempts, Casso dreamt up the idea of ambushing the bus that transported prisoners from the MCC in Lower Manhattan to the Brooklyn Federal Courthouse. Casso instructed Zappola to surveil the area. Recently promoted to captain, Zappola had hidden out in California and Florida for a time before returning to New York City to assist Casso and oversee his various business enterprises, and was therefore entrusted with coordinating his breakout. After studying the path the bus followed, Zappola decided the optimal place for an assault. The assault was opposite the Jehovah's Witness Watchtower building, a few blocks from Brooklyn's federal courthouse. The area was mostly industrial, with a warren of streets linked to a series of local avenues and express ramps. Multiple escape routes were available. Casso's crew on the outside would overtake the bus, cut the locks on its doors, and shoot their way in to free Casso, paramilitary style. The plan for the assault on the bus caused divisions among the Lucchese's incarcerated. Casso was determined to go, and so was Frank Lastarino. But Sal Avellino, another wise guy facing RICO charges, was going to stay on the bus when the others ran, as was Michael DeSantis. The plan presented enormous difficulties. First, the plotters had to be sure Casso was actually on the bus on the day they struck, a difficult thing to accomplish due to tightly restricted communications with prisoners. An acting Lucchese captain visited Casso in prison often. In preparation for the escape, Casso and his captain surreptitiously swapped running shoes during one visit. The shoes worn by prisoners were standard-issue rubber-soled laceless sneakers. There were 2 electronic signal devices hidden in the soles of the pair Casso kept. The crew on the outside would be able to detect the signal and know that Casso was on the bus when they hit it. Planning continued into the new year as Casso's collaborators monitored his hearing dates. Finally, their chance came. Early in 1994, on a cold winter day, Casso was in court by dawn. At 10 in the morning, the captains took up position at the corner of Camman Plaza and outside the Brooklyn Federal Courthouse, waiting for the prisoner bus to emerge from the gated Sally Port. As soon as he received a signal from Casso's sneaker, the captain would contact one of the crew by radio. The attack would begin. But hours passed, and the bus failed to emerge from the courthouse. The captain remained on his watch until 2:30 in the afternoon, when he abandoned his post due to the cold. He hadn't received Casso's signal. The bus was delayed that day due to the extreme weather. Casso didn't return to the prison until 5:30. In January 1995, George Zappola was indicted on federal charges linking him to 4 killings and conspiracies to kill other members of the Lucchese family. In January of 96, he was indicted in a murder and racketeering indictment. In June 1996, Zappola pleaded guilty to several murders, including the 1990 bishop's slaying. Zappola was eventually sentenced to 22 years in prison.